It's not as likely. So, all right. So I thought it would be fun just something fun to do amongst all this name calling and mudslinging that I'm doing today. It would be fun to just take a look at what these are and see if they actually see if there's any validity to what they're talking about, because it's obvious if you go and if you can get your hands on an Action Comics #1, that's a comic book worth collecting. But I'm assuming that these are more less likely, less understood, less known titles that may already be worth something, or may possibly be worth something in the future, depending on planned projects, TV shows, movies, things like that. So we're going to find out together. I thought it would be fun to find out together to see if they know what they're talking about. Because I don't talk about comic books in terms of investing, because it's really kind of a no-brainer when it comes to investing in collectibles. It's about the money you have and can put out there, and it's about what you can get back from that money. I know it's just that way with investing in anything, but when it comes to collectibles, because there's not necessarily a hard, fast marketplace, and it always depends on what the competition is, your location. There's just so many other factors that are involved, and not to mention that you don't have to have collectibles. They're not something we have to have in our lives, so they're something that you can pass on when it comes up. Let's see, what do we got here? Comic book collecting has long been a passion for many fans. Iconic titles often get all the attention. This is what I was hoping this would be. There are hidden gems worth discovering. These comics may not be well known, but they offer incredible value for collectors. If you're looking for diversity in your collection, consider keeping an eye out for these underrated treasures. Cool. That's exactly what I was hoping this was. I was hoping it wasn't going to be, gee, of course, you need to get a Detective Comics number 27. Of course that's going to be good. Oh, the Max. What a great way to start off. 1903 to 1998. There's also a television series, a cartoon series. Fantastic. Sam Keith, that's the man. And Joseph Mesner Loebs, right? Loebs, something like that. The Max is a lesser-known gem from Image Comics that gained a cult following after its release. This surreal, gritty comic focuses on the story of a homeless man named Max, who inhabits both the real world and a bizarre, dreamlike dimension. Created by Sam Keith, the artwork and storytelling are distinctive. That's Sam Keith. Sam Keith's work is noticeable. It's just like anybody who spent time understanding Matisse paintings or something like that. You know a Matisse, you know a real Matisse when you see one. I know a Sam Keith when I see one, and that's true across the board. That's great. That's a great one to start off with. It's Max, the cartoon, the comic book series. Both were one of my favorites of both of those things over the years. Absolutely. That's really cool. All right, so let's see what's next. Bone is classic. Epic fantasy comic series by Jeff Smith that began as an independent publication before gaining widespread acclaim. Series follows the adventures of three Bone cousins who find themselves caught in a magical world full of danger and mystery. Bone stands out for its combination of whimsical art and deep, intricate storytelling. It seamlessly blends humor, fantasy, and heartfelt drama, making it a multi-layered read for all ages and accessible. Easy to get into, worth the read once you get there. Bone, just fantastic. These are so great. Madman Comics and Madman himself, and that's Mike Allred. Mike Allred is another one, just like Sam Keith, that if you know your creators, you know every time you see an Allred cover or an Allred piece of art. Maybe not the storytelling. That might be a little bit more intricate, a little bit harder to read. But you see that art, you know that right there. It's right there in front of your face, and there's no question. This is Mike Allred, and I love watching out for his stuff. And it's because he does lots of covers, and he works for everybody. And so he just pops up here and there, and I will almost always grab me an Allred cover. Yeah, that's great. Madman. I have that first appearance of Madman. Saga of Swamp Thing. Now that's just classic Alan Moore storytelling. 2-year run, really like Alan Moore and a lot of people did during that time period with some of these classic characters, the Batman being one of them, of course, Superman being one, John Byrne. All of these characters had a rebirth in and around this period, and this was definitely the rebirth of the Swamp Thing, which had never really gone away. There was the movie, which was really fantastic, and just a cult following, as a lot of these things tend to do. Saga of the Swamp Thing revitalized the character and helped define the supernatural comic genre in the 80s. It's true, it really did, because that's the kind of stuff that predates superhero stories. Is these types of stories from the supernatural and the sort of witchcraft and ghosts and things like that. And so while that had faded over the years as the popularity of Superman and superheroes and the like had really increased, and certainly so with cartoons that had come through the 70s and into the early 80s, and it was nice to see this. It was just a complete switch, and it was taken a bit more seriously. A lot of comic books before the 80s are considered, they whether they are or not, people looked at them as childish, look at them as being potentially campy. It didn't help that the Batman television series did what it did. For what it's worth, I'm not decrying it. I'm not saying it was bad. I'm just saying that it gave a certain presentation. It made comic book superheroes appear a certain way, and that sort of held over. And it wasn't until some of these hardcore storytellers, the Frank Millers, the Alan Moores, with Saga of Swamp Thing, and you got your Dark Knight saga, and some of these other great stories that really retold these characters and brought whether they didn't already exist in that space or not at that time period, it certainly brought them to that time period. And how are you going to go wrong in sort of letting Alan Moore run wild with one of your characters, when you have the amazing, this is just so long ago already in the scheme of things. I wasn't even 10 years old when this was running, and it just made such a huge impact across the board on comic books, and changed. It was those kind of storytelling, that kind of storytelling from the Alan Moores and the Frank Millers, that made it so that comic books became the viable property that they are today in terms of money and the movies and things that have come along in the years since then. Really just fantastic. Let's see what's next here. What's next? Sandman. I'm not as familiar with Sandman. They're talking about the Neil Gaiman Sandman here. One from 89 to 96 is the run. One of the most critically acclaimed comic book series of all times. The series centers around Morpheus, the Lord of Dreams, and his journey through the imaginative and often darkly beautiful world. Gaiman's writing is rich and with mythological literacy and historical reference, and the series is known for its high level of artistry. And then, of course, it's still impactful today. When you're talking about Sandman, you're talking about Neil Gaiman, and unfortunately, there's these stories and these things that have happened, and whatever side you fall on, I've been warning you, telling you all of these years to stop worshiping these people and just appreciate that the artwork they provide and the creativity, the things that you enjoy, and stop pretending like they're not flawed human beings that make mistakes, and sometimes big mistakes. All right, let's see what's next here. Stray Bullets. Oh, classic. Yeah, Stray Bullets, 1995. They say to present, and I don't know that that's strictly true. Yeah, I don't know that that's exactly true or not. There's some of these that have stopped and restarted over the years, as comic books often do, and this one's not on my radar. Stray Bullets, created by David Lapham. It's a gritty and intense crime comic that explores the consequences of violence in a fractured world. Set in a dark urban environment, the series follows various characters as they navigate crime, corruption, and personal demons. Lapham's raw, unflinching storytelling and detailed artwork created a deeply immersive experience. You know what? All of these books have in common is that they're great stories and great art, and this is so much more important, and it really makes the point that I try to make as often as I can when it comes to the comic books, and that's that you should be enjoying them for the art, for the storytelling, that this collecting and hoarding and things. These things should be taking a backseat. You should be reading. If you're not reading comic books, you're not doing comic books a big favor necessarily. You're not doing creators a big favor by just collecting and buying the works. You're helping the corporations who print the stuff and put the stuff out, but you're not necessarily helping the creators. You're not going into it thinking, oh, here's this creator, here's this story that he's done before, here's a new one, I should buy that one because I want to read it. And I think that there's a potential that it's going to be good, as opposed to ooh, hey, maybe this guy was popular with his last story, maybe I'll get lucky and be able to make some money on the books in this story. That's fine. That works out great for those corporations. That works out fine for Warner Brothers and for Marvel to have their thing and to make their money printing all the extra covers and all that stuff that I don't necessarily have a problem with. It's a different conversation. So it's all great for them, for you to buy more copies and chase collectability and buy the 1 in 25s or whatever it is, but it's not necessarily helping the artist and the creators, the writers, the people that are making these things, because what they need is they need fans that collect their stuff and read their stuff because they're expecting it to be good, not because they're hoping that it's going to generate some wealth for yourself, and that it'll generate some wealth for you down the road. It's fine. It's part of the industry. I'm not saying that there's anything particularly wrong with it. I'm just telling you that you're not necessarily doing these creators, you're not doing the comic book world a favor by just collecting comic books on the off chance that you would, as an investment. You should be reading them. You should be reading them. You should be loving them for what they are, and accepting again that the creators are flawed people, that you can't expect them to be perfect, and you can't expect them to not make mistakes. The Question, this is a great character that's still around today and has gone through any number of different changes over the years, and depending on what story line even today that you're reading, it could be a different character altogether, but still just the general character of The Question themselves are really great. Created by Denny O'Neil and Dennis Cohen, a couple of just really fantastic creators that now doing a lot of their own creative work. I believe both of them are black creators, and they're off doing their thing within the black creator community. And there was something I read that the two of them were on here just recently, and it's not coming to me off the top of my head, but I did a review on it. I'd have to go back and look and see what the review was. I just remember it was good, and it was great to see that. I always love it. Just like I was talking about in the last hour, it does my heart good to see a black man carrying a firearm, a normal, just everyday person, not a gangster, not a thug, whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just a normal black man, and it does my heart well also to see these creators of different color and different ethnicity and different backgrounds and different tastes to be creators and to be successful and to have these great books and these great stories out there doing well within the marketplace for any number of reasons. It's always great to see someone exceed. It's always great to see an underdog succeed. It's always great to see someone succeed when other people are specifically telling you that you can't. When we have in our society right now, comic gate and people who bash on games and the gaming community and the comic book community and the board game community and the Magic the Gathering community and all these different communities as being not inclusive, and then they're forced to play this little game. I talked a little bit about it in the last hour with the sort of the games, with video games in particular, falling to an agenda. Well, it's happened in comic books as well. And there's this lie. There's this lie that comic books are not inclusive and that they haven't been. And this is a disconnect between what constitutes comic books and what constitutes the corporate churning of comic book material and superheroes. There's a huge disconnect between what the corporate world is doing with comic books and how they're treating characters and properties and different people and getting different people to come in and be invited into the creation process, not just the reading and collecting process of it all. When forever, since time out of mind, the entire time that there have been such a thing as comic books and pulp magazines and these types of materials, that they were always underground, that they were always subversive, that they were always done by marginalized people, these or people who feel marginalized, be it for whatever reason, race or sexual proclivity or whatever it is. There's always been a space for you. If you couldn't find it, you weren't looking for it. There's always been a space for you in comic books. And The Question and Denny O'Neil and Dennis Cohen, these are the kind of people, these are the kind of stories, these are the kind of creations that prove exactly what I'm saying in terms of that openness of the comic book industry that has always existed. I guess this is our last one, Elektra Assassin. This was a 8-part miniseries by Frank Miller, and of course that follows along right in the period after Frank Miller has already brought life back to the Daredevil character. Again, another one of these characters in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, in that time range where these amazing creators got a hold of them and redefined who these characters were. Of course, that's a little bit different with Frank Miller and Elektra in particular, and Bill Sienkiewicz on the art there. Just amazing at the time, and just more of the story and everything that Frank had already created within the Daredevil story. And so it really just great. One of the classic, and you know what's great about all of these books that it's been talking about here, they're all reasonable. These are all books that, depending on where you're shopping, if you're shopping in Amazing Fantasies, if you're shopping in my store, most of those books, almost every single one of the books in all of those series can be found for a couple bucks or less, depending on what time you're shopping around. There's a few of them. There are key ones, first issues and things like that, and the price may be a little bit more, but every single one of these books that they've talked about there are books that are reasonable, that you can get into them without having a lot of a lot of expense or investment in time, even trying to find them. They're not hard to find, and they shouldn't cost you a lot of money, and they're just amazing, enjoyable reads. I'm glad that actually worked out like that, because I didn't know that's what the article was about. It was just another one of those things where I thought, oh, well, this one's going to be fun. We'll get a chance to look at it together, and I'm glad that we did. TowardAnarchy.com, head